It's time to lock in. We're talking SEC, college football, and more. This is AP as we see it.
I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I said I'm all about that action.
I'm AP Stedham from LA, Lower Alabama. This is AP as we see it, a weekly syndicated show discussing the Southeastern Conference, college football, and the national scene and other sports. Welcome to another edition of AP as we see it. First off, we'd like to direct our audience to our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, X account, a YouTube channel is our visual broadcast, and Spotify has our audio broadcast. It's archived, and that's at AP as we see it on all our social media platforms, and also at AP Stedham, my personal one. We usually put the links on there for the broadcast and also the events that we cover and all the interviews that we've completed throughout the week. Last week was at the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. Maybe we can have a few details about that later on, but those interviews are available. We had a chance to visit with Reese Davis, the a distinguished American sportsman recipient for the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame, and that was quite a interesting conversation. You probably want to check that out. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Greer's Markets. 110 years in business now. 110 years. Think about that. 29 locations at Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, serving the Gulf Coast and beyond. They have the Lucy's famous recipes that are online, and she has a book that you could buy online or in the store. Remember, family, friends, and football and basketball, baseball, softball, all the sporting events that you gather to watch on the television. That's a winning tradition at Greer's. You can score the big savings on the fresh meats, the produce, and more for your game day spreads. And if you can't make it to one of those 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, click on the groceries to go, and you can have those items delivered to your home, your office, the venue of choice. And remember to look at all the weekly ads online so you can take advantage of those specials. They have the coloring contest for the children. And now they have the Greer's Gold. The weekly digital coupons are available. You can find those extra deals and earn rewards every time. It's free, easy, and ready when you are. So just scan the code or click the link and start savings every day. And start with your savings every day. So, and remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. So let's get on to our show. We have a little bit of a soap opera happening right now. Trifecta, we shall say. We'll begin with Lane Kiffin. We'll bring on board Steve Sarkisian and then Archie Manning. But anyway, Lane Kiffin, there was an in-depth magazine story. He sat down, and I think it was 4 hours, as I heard the author mention. And he said to the author that he was having trouble at Ole Miss with the recruits. They were reluctant to move to Oxford, Mississippi due to the racial climate, the lack of diversity, and historical treatment of blacks in general. The parents, the grandparents, they objected strongly to those recruits moving to Oxford to play for Ole Miss. Ole Miss has I think it's around 10% African-American students, LSU about 19%. So that was the perceived treatment of blacks in Oxford, Mississippi. He mentioned that was something that prevented him from recruiting some high-profile recruits. Now, make certain that it's probably those from out of the region. And, could have been some in the state of Mississippi as well, possibly, but I think it's the ones out of the southeastern region. But what I didn't understand was, why would Lane Kiffin now throw shade after he left Ole Miss? If he wanted to present that difficulty on a larger platform when he was at Ole Miss, I think he would have had the support and made some changes there. It would have drifted in that direction. He could have come out in the same magazine or some other platform, TV, radio. It would have been heard by the majority of people involved in college football. But he chose to bring this up on his way out as he exited Ole Miss for LSU, and he's there now. Ole Miss is a major rival. He said it was facts, and I'm not saying I don't agree with him that was the case at Ole Miss. Their history does present some problems for people who are not familiar with the University of Mississippi campus in Oxford. So, but why do this now? And I think, and then he ended up apologizing. And you're wondering if it's really genuine. He's stating it was just facts. It wasn't intentional or calculated. But with Lane Kiffin, I don't know if you could accept it as being genuine. That's something that the people will decide. But anyway, he came out and made those statements. The in-state recruits of Mississippi are more apt to probably disregard the history because they've lived there for so long, and they want to represent the state of Mississippi. That's their university, good or bad. But they're trying to make change and affect change. So I think the out-of-state recruits, the selling of Ole Miss was more difficult for Lane Kiffin, but every school has issues that they must overcome. That's one specific to Ole Miss. So all his protests about not being intentional or calculated, like I said, not everybody, I think, will accept that apology as genuine. But he'll give himself an advantage in recruiting by making those statements against his rival. That's how some people will receive those comments. So anyhow, but Ole Miss, they addressed some of these problems years ago. They banned the flag in 1997. The 2003, they changed that from the Colonel Rebs, I think, to no longer the mascot. And when you look at Ole Miss right now, they're in position to continue the winning ways with Pete Golding. Lane Kiffin did some great things there, won a lot of ball games, got him into the college football playoff for the first time. So if I was Ole Miss, I would embrace any perceived issues and make certain that you're voicing that you understand those issues and you're trying to affect change at all time. And in moving forward, it's going to be different for those group of players at Ole Miss and on their campus. But one thing that they're all going to have to take notice of is this gerrymandering in politics in Louisiana, in Alabama, in Tennessee, and other places. You're trying to ban the representation of the Black community. I don't know how that's going to be perceived, not only by the in-state recruits, but by the out-of-state recruits. Is that going to affect the Southeastern Conference? Is it going to be a minuscule that you're not going to have some of the transfers, maybe some from other parts of the country? Or is it going to be something that dips into the Southeastern region itself and has those athletes going to schools in other parts of the country to other conferences? So I'm kind of looking in these next few years with all this political shenanigans that is happening with your excluding the Black representation in certain states. I wonder if that's going to backfire on those states with their football teams. And we know how important in the Southeast the football team is to the state. So these political leaders, I'm not sure they calculated that that presence of not having Black representation in their state and eliminating that altogether, because that's something that the Black community, their ancestors fought for in the 60s and before, actually, and they reached that level where they were having at least one or two representatives from the state. But with this gerrymandering, they're eliminating the Black representation. So I don't know how that's going to affect the SEC. But I could tell you one thing: other conferences, other regions of the country are going to bring those facts up to these African American athletes that are being pursued nationally. So I think it's something to consider, and I'm not sure if the political powers did in their determination to eliminate the Black community from representation. So will it be amplified in the region? Will it reach out to all the Southeastern states who participate in this gerrymandering of excluding the Black community from representation? I don't know. But like I said, you can be certain that these other conferences, other regions of the country will bring it in. Now, Lane Kiffin, he said that he felt better with the diversity efforts in Louisiana. Like I said, with that gerrymandering in Louisiana, he'll have something to address himself with the African-American athletes that he's trying to pursue in the state, outside the state, their transfers as well. So that diversity is is something that I think has always been good for this country, but not accepted by everyone in spite of it. But it's something to consider. In these states, they're making the move quickly to change with representation. So I don't know how it's going to affect these states who are gerrymandering. So, but over time, we'll see if the cumulative effect on the SEC is it's going to be minuscule or significant. But I think with that gerrymandering, you're going backwards in a hurry because, as I said, their ancestors struggled all these years, and it's been negated if they want to be full participants. Yeah, we want to play football for you universities and basketball and all the other sports, baseball and track and field and golf, every single sport that you can list, men and women. But we want to be full participants in that state as well, and they want to be represented. So they're going to have to figure that out at each school in each state. But Lane Kiffin, he came out and he threw shade at his former school. He did a lot of good things for them. So I don't know why he didn't stand up when he was there. I mean, that would have been the leadership role that I would have suggested to him if he thought it was an issue, and he certainly did. I would have had a press conference emphasizing that issue and said, we're here for change, and we're going to make sure moving forward that it's different. It's different at Ole Miss, and everybody's going to be represented. And but he chose otherwise. He chose in that in-depth magazine article to throw shade at his former school and his rival now, Ole Miss. So anyhow, but we're going to come back after these messages. We have our guest this week. It's going to be Alex Miller. I'm from the Bryan-College Station Eagle. That's going to be segment 3 and 4. But segment 2, we're going to be right back and continue our discussion of the soap opera in the SEC. We'll be right back after these messages with AP as we see it. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. And we're back with AP as we see it, and we just want to make mention of our last topic. And the SEC is a national brand. They were very diligent in promoting the SEC around the entire country and globally, actually. And I don't know how this gerrymandering will affect the brand nationally and globally to bring athletes to their 16 schools, universities and colleges that are very strong in athletics. I don't know. We shall see over time, I guess. But anyhow, Lane Kiffin brought to light that specific issue at Ole Miss, and he chose to do it on his way out and not when he was there. Not on a major platform anyway. If he said it, I wasn't aware. Somebody will tell me, I'm sure. But let's move on to Steve Sarkisian. That's the second person in this trifecta. He was railing about the academics at other schools, specifically Ole Miss, saying that they would accept all your credits as a transfer, whereas at Texas, they only accept 50%. So he saw that as a disadvantage, which it is. But I'm thinking you're at the University of Texas, 1,200 plus high schools. So that means, and you're the flagship school for that state of Texas. So not only do you have that opportunity to attract players from 1,200 plus high schools that play football, but even when the players transfer back or from another school, they're looking at Texas to return to their home state, the flagship university. So I know a lot of coaches, and you hear them say over and over again, we can control our destiny. We're not worried about the opponent. So I'm thinking, why did Steve Sarkisian choose to lash out at the academics and mention specifically Ole Miss? I think he brought up other schools as well, saying that the academic integrity is lacking with this transfer portal. But I'm thinking, I have all the advantages at the University of Texas. As I said, the 1,200 plus high schools, all the players that might consider transferring back to their home state of Texas or within Texas. They're looking at the University of Texas. So I don't see why it would make any difference to him if some schools have different academic requirements. If you want change at the University of Texas, then you have to speak to your administration. You can control your own destiny right there in Austin. You don't need to speak against another school, I don't believe. But anyway, so Ole Miss was being hit on a couple fronts. Lane Kiffin on the recruiting of African Americans, and then their academics by accepting transfers. And I don't know that I don't think Ole Miss is the only one that would accept most of your credits. Why he singled them out, I don't know. But so he was decrying the academic standards at Ole Miss and accepting the 100% of the credits, where Texas only accepts 50% of the credits. And not only that, he made a comment about at Ole Miss you can major in basket weaving to come back. And so I don't think that's going to sit well with people at Ole Miss and their alumni and their faithful. And so it should be quite interesting this fall when those teams play each other. But anyway, that's Steve Sarkisian. So I would, and he also said something about, and maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, that there's a lack of following the rules. Every school, they just complain to their state attorney general and then they sue the NCAA. But like I said, at Texas, where you have all the advantages, there's no school, I don't think, in America that has the advantages of the University of Texas that they hold in that big state. So, but that's on his mind, academics. I would say recruit like-minded people and you're going to survive and have fun and be successful. I can't worry about the world, I would tell them. I'm not worried about the college football world. I'll take care of University of Texas and we'll be fine. And so when Lane Kiffin is making these statements about Ole Miss, and then Steve Sarkisian, we have the third person in this trifecta, Archie Manning, the revered Ole Miss legendary quarterback. He has to defend his school, saying that they've made changes through the years, considering the flag and the mascot and some other things. So here it is, Archie Manning, the grandfather of Arch Manning, the quarterback at Texas, the father of Eli Manning, the Ole Miss quarterback. Those are two legends, Archie and Eli at Ole Miss. I think that the next time Steve Sarkisian and Archie Manning met, there's probably going to be a conversation. But that's the trifecta, the soap opera that has affected the SEC these last week or so. But during the fall, LSU will travel to Oxford, Mississippi on the 19th. And Texas and Ole Miss, they meet on October 24th. So those games will have a little bit more meeting because of those comments that were made. So we'll see what happens. But that's the trifecta, the soap opera that has happened in the off season. A lot of banter, a lot of chatter. And it's really surprising some of the comments made because they're outside their boundaries. Just stay with it. Stay with your school, promote your school, and I think you'll be fine. But they chose otherwise to lash out at Ole Miss for various reasons, whether it was intended or calculated, or they were seeking a benefit in some form or fashion. I don't know. Only they would know. But anyway, we have the 9-game fallout of the SEC. They have the 9 games now. So you have a couple of teams backing away from a Power 4 future opponent. Alabama dropped Oklahoma State, and Georgia dropped Florida State. Although Georgia, I heard they were thinking about a neutral site down the road. But I think it's really a wait-and-see attitude about the college football playoff. We all know right now it's 12 teams in this college football playoff, and how the college football playoff selection committee will respond to the strength of schedule. So maybe when they find out, and then next year or so, you'll see some of those Power 4 teams come back on the schedule. Maybe the Big Ten and the SEC have a rivalry and a matchup that they can present to all the teams, and they'll agree to play one game a year. It'll be the Big Ten is 18 teams, the SEC is 16, so there'll be 2 teams left out from the SEC. But anyway, let's go over the college football playoff. Just a few items about that. The college football playoff in 2027. It's still the 12 right now, but they're going to make a decision here very soon about 16 or 24. I think three of the Power Four right now are for the 24. The SEC is the only holdout at the moment. So, but the 2027 playoff, which is for the 26th season, you'll have the top four teams from the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC. They shall get a bye. And then you have the highest rated from the other one, the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, the MAC, the Mountain West, the Pac-12, and the Sun Belt. So you take one team from there. And then you have the next 7 highest teams in that top 12. Now, of course, Notre Dame will be included. If they make the top 12, they will be included. Now, if the automatic qualifier is ranked below the top 25, they will be inserted as number 12. So you'll have the home games that first week, the 5 team through the 12 team. They will play each other 12 versus 5, 11 versus 6, 10 versus 7, 9 versus 8. Now, the number 1 seed, this is something I think slightly different. They can pick the quarterfinal site and their semifinal site. So that's kind of interesting. You have to have some strategy. What if, for instance, what if Georgia is a team, let's say that that's a possibility you might play, or a team out of the Southeastern Conference? Are you going to pick Atlanta as your quarterfinal site, if that's one of the quarterfinal sites? Or are you going to try to pick something as far away from the potential opponent that you might play after that bye game? So there's some strategy involved, but the number 1 will pick the quarterfinal site and the semifinal. The number 2, they will pick their site as well in the semifinal, and then number 3, and then number 4 will just be assigned the remaining bowl. So you have the number 1 will play the 8-9, and in that bracket, the 4 will play the 5 versus 12 winner. And then you have in the next bracket, the number 2 will play the 7-10 winner, and the 3 will play the 6-11 winner. So you have the Fiesta Bowl as a quarterfinal, the Cotton Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl. Fiesta on December 30th, I believe it is. Cotton Bowl is on the 1st, Peach Bowl is on the 1st, Rose Bowl is on the 1st. That's a triple header that day. And then the semifinals is on the 14th, the Orange Bowl, and the 15th is the Sugar Bowl. And the championship, national championship, will be Las Vegas on the 25th of January. So, but that's some information about the college football playoff. And I think it's leaning towards 24. I really do. Now that 3 of the 4 conferences have come out and stated that they're for the 24 team playoff. And I think the SEC would be too, because they'll give them an option to get a lot of teams that, they say they're one of the best conferences. Let it ride. Let's see. The proof's in the pudding. Let's play it on the field. And you say you're one of the best, prove it. And I think it'll work out for them. So I don't think that I think that 24 team playoff is unstoppable with now just the SEC, the only holdout. So, but we shall see. And they have to make that decision in December. They're going to try to make that decision by December. Couldn't do it last December. So Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, they have to come to grips with the decision and move forward, because they have to get these television contracts in play. I think the contract right now is good for the 12 or the 14 teams at the moment. So if there's the 16 or 24, probably a new contract has to be filed. But anyhow, we're going to be back with our guest, like I said, Alex Miller of the Bryan-College Station Eagle. We're going to discuss the Texas A&M Aggies. They had a great season last year under Coach Elko and their quarterback, Marcel Reed. So we're going to be right back after these messages with our guest, and we'll have another segment of AP as we see it. We'll be right back after these messages. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. And we're back with AP As We See It, and our very special guest, Alex Miller, writer, reporter for the Bryan-College Station Eagle, to discuss the Texas A&M Aggies. Alex, welcome to AP As We See It.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Alex, they had a fabulous season under Mike Elko, came on board and really changed things. I think they got a lot more tougher, but just to recap last year, what are some of the positive things that you saw from Mike Elko and his staff?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, they made the college football playoff. It was the first time they'd done it since they'd moved to that format in, 2014? So, I mean, it
Right.
was a long time coming for A&M. They've had some close calls, right? 2016, they were in
Yes.
the thick of it. 2020, they finished number 5. Even 2024, they were off to a really good start and kind of faltered there in November. A&M's whole
Yeah.
thing last year was finish. And in a lot of ways, they did finish because they made the college football playoff. But in some ways, they maybe didn't achieve what their ceiling could have been with some of the late season falters that they had at Texas against Miami in the college football playoff, who we learned was actually pretty good despite being a number 10 seed at the time. But uh,
Right.
yeah, huge season for A&M. And in year 2 of Mike Elko, that was all you could have asked for was making the playoff. That was something that A&M was chomping at the bit to get done, and they got there. And so now it's, can they sustain it? Can they double down and build off of that? Because that's kind of been the story of A&M this century. They've had a few of those kind of mountaintop seasons where they kind of spike up and they peak, but then they kind of come back down. And so I
Yeah.
think this year is all about, can they stay there? Can they maintain and sustain that success? And they're feeling pretty optimistic about it as we wrap up spring football.
Yeah, they're the carnival team, right? Roller coaster, up and down.
That's a great way to put it.
But any changes with the assistant coaches, anybody they brought on board as any type of an analyst, Alex?
Yeah, that's been a big thing this offseason is A&M had to replace both coordinators. Offensive coordinator Colin Klein, he is now the head coach at his alma mater, Kansas State. And, I mean, can't fault a guy for going home like that, getting a head
No.
coaching job. And, I think that was very like, hey, man, go do that. Like, this is kind of your dream, right? And
Right.
so they were really excited for him. So they promoted Holman Wiggins, who had been their wide receivers coach the last 2 years. He had been at Alabama previously. And so I think that he's a guy that they're really hopeful for. This will be his first time calling plays, but he's learned under a lot of really good offensive minds when you think about guys like Justin Fuente, Bill O'Brien, Steve Sarkisian, right? Like he's got a good lineage of people that he's learned under that they felt comfortable making that kind of internal hire. Now, on the defensive side, A&M also lost defensive coordinator Jay Bateman, who is now at Kentucky. And one of the things from last year was that Elko took more autonomy in calling plays on the defense. Of course, Elko made his whole calling up through the assistant ranks as a big time defensive coordinator. He was at Notre Dame before he came to A&M, and then defense is that's his bread and butter, right? Everybody's got their bread and butter.
Yes.
Defense is Mike's bread and butter, and so A&M had a lot of struggles down the stretch of that 2024 season. So Mike took over the play calling a little more in 2025. Jay Bateman goes to Kentucky. Last time we had talked to him, he said, "Hey, like the idea of getting a little more autonomy in the defense. Kind of makes sense." A&M promotes Lyle Hemphill, who had come on to help A&M kind of in the secondary. That was a place they really struggled in 2024, and really helped them in 2025. So now he's the defensive coordinator, but Elko's still got a lot of the autonomy. So that's 2 internal hires. Not to mention Colin Klein also coached quarterbacks, which A&M also made an internal hire for. They promoted Joey Lynch to that quarterback's role, and from all accounts, that's been a really good move. He's been working really well with Marcel Reed, a guy that they're really hoping can take the next step and become a true championship level quarterback. He was a Heisman contender up until that last week of the regular season when he had a bit of a struggle there in Austin, and A&M's lost to Texas. But aside from that, brought back Elijah Robinson, defensive line coach that was really loved during the Jimbo Fisher era. He had served as A&M's interim head coach when Jimbo had been fired. Guy's a great coach. He's had a great track record. He's also a big-time recruiter. So he's a guy that they're really excited about. And yeah, those are kind of the big ones that A&M had this offseason.
Yeah, those are significant, and it's interesting they were mostly internal as well, and bringing on somebody who was there before. Speaking of Marcel Reed and Heisman Trophy, yeah, I received some information A&M sent me promoting his candidacy last year, so I still have it right here somewhere. But Marcel Reed made the jump from 1,800 yards or so to 3,100 yards. I think it was probably, if you're looking back, I don't know if you would agree, Alex, a little bit high in the interceptions, 24 TDs, 12 interceptions. What do you think?
Yeah, taking care of the football is definitely a main prerogative for Marcel and his growth this offseason. I think at times last year, he maybe forced a few of those passes that maybe he shouldn't have, throw the ball away. Even taking a sack's better than turning it over. But I think that is something that they're looking to improve. And something I think that goes along with that is just continued improvement in his downfield passing. There was a bit of a narrative last summer that Marcel Reed is not a passer, and I think he dispelled that in a lot of ways. But to take the next step in his game, I think he knows he needs to complete some of those downfield shots a little bit of a higher clip. And A&M definitely, they've got the receiving core to make some downfield plays. Added Isaiah Horton out of the transfer portal this season from Alabama. They brought in Mario Craver the year before. He'll be a returning starter as a junior. And not to mention a guy in Ashton Bethel Roman who really emerged as a little bit of an outside threat last year after he had a redshirted as a freshman. And so I think that Marcel is very self-aware of his deficiencies, and they're doing everything they can to correct those as best they can because they really trust him. They've really gone all in with him. They're really high on him. They believe that he's the guy for the job, but he's still got a ways to go, and he'd be the first one to tell you that.
And keeping on that offensive theme, who are some of the transfers they brought in to be significant besides the ones you mentioned on the offensive side?
Isaiah Horton was definitely a big-time addition, no doubt. He's a big-bodied X-type receiver, right, that can go and make those one-on-one contested catches. That was kind of the missing piece that A&M didn't have last year in that 2025 season. Casey Concepcion was incredible in so many regards.
Yes.
But he was just not that was not his skill set. That's just not the type of player he was. Dynamic playmaker. He's not Isaiah Horton though. And so adding a player like that was a must for A&M. And then besides that, on the offensive side, revamped the tight end room, brought in a couple of guys. But the big thing has been the offensive line. And that is a big question mark for A&M going into this season. They're having to replace 4 starters. And all 4 of those starters, they were drafted in the NFL draft last month. I mean, these were big-time guys that were a key reason why A&M made the college football playoff last year. And so what A&M did, they hit the transfer portal hard. They're still pretty high on some kids that have been homegrown talent, guys that they signed out of high school that are finally, getting into that second, third year range in the program that they're hoping can make a step and compete for a starting spot. But they also went and got 4 guys with SEC starting experience, and maybe they were playing on some offensive lines that struggled last year, like LSU or South Carolina. But they're really high on their development there with Adam Cushing. He's a guy that they really value as an assistant coach and has had a pretty good track record in his 2 years at A&M. And I think you look at a guy like Wilkin Formby that came from Alabama, and they believe that he can be a true right tackle that can be a high-end player in the SEC. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the offensive line actually comes together. I think that A&M in a lot of ways, they've got some good depth. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few mixing and matching of combinations, especially that first month of the season. But that's definitely a big thing is, can the offensive line come together this season? That'll be a key litmus test of, can A&M sustain that success that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the offensive line is so critical to keep your quarterback upright and have the ability to progress through all the options downfield. So if you don't address that offensive line, you're really uh, depriving your quarterback and your offensive chance to succeed. So, uh, Alex, about 15 seconds. Does Marcel Reed like the tight end? Does he like tight ends?
Yeah, A&M likes tight ends. They've used it pretty well the last couple of years, and but with some new guys, that's another position that I'm like, okay, who's going to emerge as the guy that could be a go-to target in this offense this coming season?
Okay. Okay, yeah, we're going to discuss that in the next segment. We're going to be right back with our guest, Alex Miller, the writer reporter from the Bryan-College Station Eagle. We'll be right back after these messages with another segment of AP as we see it. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. And we're back with AP as we see it, and our special guest, Alex Miller, writer, reporter, Bryan-College Station Eagle. Alex, we were discussing the tight end position, some names you'd like to bring to our audience.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a three-horse race right now at that room. You got a couple of transfers in, Richie Anderson and Houston Thomas. Thomas is a local boy. He grew up here in College Station, played high school ball here. I actually covered him when he was in high school. He spent his last 3 or 4 seasons at UTSA, and so now he's spending his last year here at A&M, coming home. And then kind of a homegrown guy, redshirted last year, Keati Armstrong. He's a huge kid. I mean, big kid, like 6'5", 260.
That's big, yeah.
And I'm really curious to see how his development progresses. But
Yes.
we'll see. It's going to be a mix of guys, and I think that they're going to keep us on our heels this first month of the season on who's getting what reps and who ends up emerging into that October stretch.
Mm-hmm. Alex, any freshmen of note do you think that have a really good chance to contribute?
Yeah, I think when you look at receiver, A&M really they were really excited about that freshman signing class they had last year at the receiver room. And I think it all starts with Aaron Gregory. He's a guy from Georgia that A&M was able to pull, and he's a little skinny, but he's big and he's got a large frame. Like he's going to fill out and be a big receiver once he gets into the weight room a little more. But he is smooth. He catches balls. He's not scared. He really turned heads this spring, and I think that he is a guy that he could definitely see playing time from week 1. But you look at that entire, even though A&M's got some returning veterans and guys they brought in at receiver, that freshman class at receiver, they're going to play guys like Madden Williams and Jaden Warren, Mike Brown. Those are going to be names that you're going to hear about in the coming years, and they might make some splashes this fall. So don't be surprised if you hear one of those names in October, November in SEC play.
Mike Elko, a defensive-minded coach, as you stated, and he's well known across the country for succeeding. Defensively now, who are the people going to terrorize that quarterback and plug the holes up the middle for the A&M Aggies?
Yeah, I mean, A&M really is having to rebuild both lines of scrimmage. And on the defensive side, you know, they've got a couple of guys coming back. DJ Hicks at defensive tackle, Marco Jones at defensive end. He was a freshman last year that made a bit of an impact. He probably had the most impact of any freshman last season. And he's a guy that they're hoping steps into kind of their jack position role that Cassius Howell won SEC Defensive Player of the Year at last year. And so if he can be a guy that they can find pass rush from, that will be a huge boost. They brought in a guy named Anto Saka from Northwestern. Doesn't have maybe the best stat line, but you just look at the guy and you look at his frame, you look at the athleticism. This guy can play. If A&M can draw some more production out of him, he's the type of guy that can be maybe a menace off the edge here in the SEC. And then they hit the portal pretty hard at defensive tackle, brought in 3 guys that kind of provides a little bit of a veteran presence. They went really heavy on the D-line in their 2025 signing class. That was a group they were really excited about last year. So all those guys are going to be sophomores. And so curious to see, guys like Landon Rink, Chase Sims missed last year due to an injury. DJ Sanders had limited time. So those are some of the young guys that I think that could see some time. Not to mention TJ Searcy was probably their most steady player on the defensive line last year, kind of opposite of that jack position. And so he's a returning starter that could provide some pass rush. Linebacker, A&M unfortunately had a pretty tough injury to their captain, Damian Sanford, during the spring game. Lower body injury, looked like a lower leg deal. Still not sure what his timetable is to return, if it could be the start of the season, if it's the middle of the season. I think that's still to be determined. But that would be a huge loss for the Aggies if he misses any time. He really came on last season as a key piece, kind of in that second line at linebacker. And then, but the good thing for A&M is they've got some depth at linebacker, and they've got some young guys they're really excited about. Noah McHale, he's the guy to think about, to know name of. Jordan Lockhart, same thing. They brought in a guy, Ray Coney from Tulsa, who was really good in the American Conference last year. So they've got some potential at linebacker, but they need some guys to step up. And then in the secondary, that's actually probably where they return the most experience. They bring back two starters at safety, and Dalton Brooks and Marcus Ratcliffe. And then on the edges, they got Des Ricks, who was pretty good last year in his first year starting after transferring in from Alabama. Then on the other side, it's gonna be interesting. Julio Humphreys, a guy that didn't play much last year after transferring in from Georgia, but they've also brought in a guy in Ricky Gibson from Tennessee. He missed most of the season last year due to injury as well. So how does that kind of pan out? And same thing at the nickel position. There's some battle there, but it'll probably be Jordan Shaw at nickel. And so secondary, they're looking a little more firm and concrete in those areas.
Alex, you defined all the defensive potential. What about the kicking game, which is so important? The kicker, the punter, the return game.
Yeah, A&M brings back punter Tyler White. He's a guy that will be a veteran and a guy that they're going to count on. Kicker was a bit of a liability at times last year, and so they had 2 guys that they used to graduate from last year's team. And so they brought in a guy in David Alanu from Illinois transfer. He was pretty steady in the Big Ten last season, and they've got a freshman in Asher Murray that I think could be of competition and really make some noise and push for that spot in fall camp. A&M likes to do the thing where maybe they have a place kicker, but then they have a kickoff specialist. So going to be interesting to see kind of how those roles shake out. But that's kind of the skinny on special teams for A&M.
Oh, yeah, they take the specialist term to the nth degree. I understand perfectly, which is fine, which is good. I like that. More people can contribute. Looking at the schedule, at home, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Texas in the conference, and then Arizona State. What about that game, Alex? Arizona State.
That's a game A&M's got to
12th
win,
of September.
That's a non-conference game against a power conference opponent. I'm curious to see what Arizona State looks like. They lose Sam Levitt to LSU.
Yes.
They've been pretty good under Kenny Dillingham, but that's A&M's game. They A&M should win that game. That if I'm making a prediction right now, I've got A&M winning that game. They need to take care of business at home, and then you go straight into SEC play. And A&M's SEC schedule, it sets up pretty interesting, and I think in some ways it's a bit advantageous. They don't have any crazy road stretches. No 3 weeks in a row on the road. I think the only back-to-back they have, they got the bye week in between. I think they go at Alabama, bye week at South Carolina. So that sets up pretty nicely. You're facing a lot of teams with either first-year head coaches, whether it's Kentucky or Missouri, or you've got teams
Oh,
that
I mean,
maybe they're going to have
Arkansas,
Arkansas.
right? You meant
Arkansas, yeah.
Arkansas, yeah.
Sorry, I meant Arkansas. That's a game A&M should win, and they've had the Razorbacks number since they've been in the SEC. Arkansas's only beat them once in 14 years.
Right.
That's a game A&M should win. They're playing several schools that are going to have first-year quarterbacks too. I realize Sam Leavitt is a veteran quarterback in his own right, but
Yes.
what's LSU going to look like at the end of September? And oh, by the way, A&M gets them the week after they have to go to Oxford and play Ole Miss in what's going to be a crazy heated game, as we all know. So
Yeah.
I think the schedule is definitely harder. They've got to play Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas. Two of those on the road, and
Yes.
A&M's got to beat Texas. They need to get it done, and they've lost the last 2 years. That's a game that matters here, of course. And the last 2 years, there's been a lot at stake in that game, and as it shapes up, it looks like that could be the case again this year. And so, can A&M beat Texas, especially when they get them at home? That's going to be a big question mark. But A&M's got a huge road game at OU the week before. It's a tough finish for the Aggies when you look at the schedule.
Yeah. We just have less than a minute, Alex. I just wanted to mention that South Carolina game. They're waiting in Columbia because that was a game that A&M won for the ages in the comeback mode, right? Maybe that's historically the greatest comeback. You would know better than I. But that South Carolina team, they have to be thinking, we gave that one away, or at least we contributed to their win.
What's funny is at halftime they were down 30-3, and I jokingly turned to our sports editor and said, "Hey, watch A&M come back and win this game 31-30." And lo and behold, that's what happened. I was mostly
Alex,
kidding, but they did it, so I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, Alex, you should have made that call from Las Vegas probably, but I digress. Hey, we want to thank Alex Miller, the writer-reporter from the Bryan-College Station Eagle. Thank you so much for all your observations about the Aggies, and I'll see you in Tampa, Alex, I guess, and on the road with A&M for sure. But thank you so much, and that's our show this week, AP As We See It, and we'd like to mention our social media platforms. Check us out, and we'll be back next week with another episode of AP As We See It. Thank you. Hi, I'm AP Stedham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.